So anyone that's been around guns for a while kind of knows that you're just not supposed to let anything touch the barrel while you're shooting a rifle. It's more or less an established fact that if something touches the barrel, you're gonna miss, or it's gonna, cause flares. I wanted to find out what happens when you just place your finger on the barrel, or when you rest the barrel on something like you might accidentally do during a hunting scenario. So that's the kind of thing we're going to do today. Now, MDT did this test a while ago. Not exactly this test. Their setup was a pretty neat little setup with a little pressure apparatus that could measure the pressure they were exerting on the barrel with a little plastic V-block that pushed down on it. And it's really neat. You should go watch it. But it's not exactly the practical scenario that I would imagine actually having something touch my barrel while shooting. First of all, my finger is the most likely thing to be touching it. If I'm holding the fore end, maybe it's just my thumb pressing against it. Or in a video that I shot recently, you can go watch it up here somewhere, I actually curled my hand around the top of the barrel, right at the front of the scope. The reason I did that is to control recoil better. So this rifle is obviously not a heavyweight gun. It's not ultra light, but it is definitely not heavy. And I don't know if you can tell, I'm sure I look massive, but I am in fact a relatively small human. I'm about 140, 145 pounds, about 5'8". So a 8 something pound 308 pushes me around a fair bit. I need to be able to control that muzzle rise and be able to spot my own shots at distance. And that's quite difficult, especially at relatively close-ish range, 300-400 yards, with a high recoiling, for me, rifle. So I use that grip. I don't apply a ton of pressure, but enough to help it keep from jumping, right? So that I maintain a sight picture or regain my sight picture very quickly. So that's why I actually do that. Okay, enough talking. Let's go ahead and get into the test. We're going to establish our baselines from the prone position and from the kneeling position. I'll explain why kneeling a little bit later. We're going to do 5 rounds on each baseline. We're then going to do resting the barrel on a bag, whether it's a backpack or sandbag, whatever. And then we're going to do resting it on a stick. And we're going to see what the point of impact shifts are. We're going to do kneeling, like I said. We're going to do this baseline, 5 rounds. And then we're going to do thumb over the bore, kind of like a C-clamp grip, just resting on it, not actually clamping down hard. And then we'll actually do, with our thumb, clamping down hard on the barrel and the fore end. And then we're going to do barrel resting on a stick, kneeling. So I'm mostly interested in how far away from my point of aim these shots land in relation to my baseline. So let's head back to the firing line. We're gonna load this guy up and do a little shooting. So first group we're gonna do here is our baseline from the prone. So nothing touching the barrel. I'll have it rested on this sandbag, and we'll see what kind of group we're printing. So we're going to do 5 rounds for both of our baselines, and I'm only going to do 3 rounds for each of the something touching the barrel tests. Within 3 rounds, we should be able to get an idea of whether we're having very little shift or whether we're having an extreme shift. Okay. And just for those of you who believe in cold bore shots, I'm going to go ahead and send 1 round right at that little dot on the head, just so that we're not firing any of our groups off of a totally cold bore. Like I mentioned in that last video, this scope is a little far forward for me. Can't get my body position perfect, but See what we can do. If I'm not mistaken, that's pretty good, pretty centered. So, if I do my part, I should be able to get this 5-round group pretty well centered. So, from what I can see, that was a less than desirable baseline, less than desirable result. A lot of those shots went high, just maybe barely touching the edge of that 2 MOA circle. And I do believe that that is actually me, not the gun. Part of the reason for that is that I'm a little too low to the ground, I think, and only the top of the butt is sticking into my shoulder. So what is happening during firing is that the gun is slipping off my shoulder, going down, and bringing the muzzle up. That's a shooter issue. So, but that is what we've got, and that is something that happens. So we're gonna roll with that for our baseline. So now I'm gonna do my first prone test where the barrel is resting on a bag. So I'm gonna bring the rifle back. I'll have to build it up a little bit so I'm not so low to the ground, but I'm gonna have the barrel resting right on the bag, the whole end of the barrel right there, and we're gonna see what kind of results that yields. So, barrel fully in contact with the bag right here. Now we're going middle target on the left. So as I'm sure you can see, those all went very high. So, barrel resting on the bag, pretty bad. Don't do that. So now we're going to do a very similar test, but we're going to rest the barrel on a stick. Now this simulates maybe being in the field and dropping down into the prone and using a log or a stick or something like that as a rest. And mistakenly, instead of resting on your forend, resting on the actual barrel. So let's see how bad that is. Well, right off the bat, I can tell you it feels less stable, that's for sure. Because the barrel can actually slide around more. So, if I was in a hurry and nervous, I might not notice. So how bad is this in comparison? Here we go. Let's run down there and take a look. So this is a very strange result. This is my baseline. Most of them went a little bit high. And like I said, I think a lot of that was actually me. This was my cold bore, where I think before the rifle settled further into the bag, where I actually had a little bit better body position. Again, that's on me. These are the 3 where the barrel was resting on the sandbag. This group went, what, 2 inches, 2.5 inches above my baseline group. Now what's surprising is the next one, and again, small sample size, but still pretty strange, that is our group from resting on the stick. So again, it's almost exactly the same point of impact shift, but I mean, probably just chance, but it's still kind of strange that like resting on the stick gave me this 3-shot tiny clover leaf. But anyway, let's go back and start working on these guys up here. So for these kneeling tests, something I wanted to mention is that, as you might imagine, I cannot get quite as stable as I would in the prone position. And as you also might expect, my groups are not going to be quite as good because I can't get as stable. So I'll do my best to call my shots and let you know if I think I sent one wild, so that we're not skewing the test too much. And at some point, I'm gonna do a video all about point of impact shifts in various shooting positions, standing, kneeling, prone, etc. That'll be interesting, but I need a trigger cam for that, so I'm gonna have to wait. A little side note I just thought about while I'm walking from the target back to the shooting position. That baseline that I shot from the prone. Now, it's real tempted to be super disappointed with that, assuming that it was in fact me, which I do believe it was. But as long as you believe you know what happened and it's something that is correctable, mistakes aren't mistakes. They're just information. That's all they are. So that's something that I know I need to work on or prevent the rifle slipping off the bag or slipping off my shoulder and causing the muzzle to rise during recoil, during the bullet exiting. That's something I need to mitigate. So again, not a failure, just information. So we're going to go ahead and get our kneeling baseline. It's going to be 5 rounds at that top right target. Like I mentioned before, I do not expect miracles as far as group size. But what I'm hoping for is just a relatively well-centered group so that we have a good comparison for our barrel contact tests. To help me get stable, I'm going to use this little bag. This is Jen's bag that she made for the last Guardian competition. It's just an old laundry bag that she had, and we got some styrofoam bead fill from I think like Joann's Fabrics or Michael's or something like that. It actually works pretty great. So during the shots, my finger will not be touching the barrel at all. Taking my time, trying to make sure I send, you know, as stable a possible shot. I'm not going to rush it. If I got to readjust, I got to readjust. With the exception of one outside that circle, the group from kneeling's better than the than the prone group. But that's actually not surprising because of what I said earlier about the rifle being too low on my shoulder when I was in the prone. Basically, it's only contacting up here and the rifle is under recoil slipping down, and so the muzzle is rising. And this is happening just a tiny bit just as the bullet is exiting the muzzle, and it's enough to send those shots like around an inch high. So this group is actually far better centered over the actual point of aim. So we got a better baseline from kneeling. All right, so let's go ahead and do our next one. Let's see if I can read it. What do I got? Oh, right. Okay. We'll do our first kneeling test, which is going to be thumb over the bore. And this is actually very often how I will shoot. And like I said, a reason for that is to be able to manage recoil and not have the gun jump around, and be able to actually spot my impacts or misses with this relatively lightweight, heavy for me recoiling gun. So let's see what happens there. So we're just going to load up our 3 rounds for this one, and that should give us enough of an idea of whether they're going close to the same area or they are going wild. So since I'm using, still use it for this. Yeah, more contact, more better. Okay, so this is our thumb over the bore. I am not clamping onto the gun. I'm simply resting my thumb, basically the weight of my arm and hand resting right here at just in front of the optic. And this feels far more stable already than the last position. Here we go. So you can see how much quicker I'm able to get back on target and run the bolt. That one was me a bit. Pulled it just a little bit right. So as you can see down there, there is not a significant point of impact shift. If you're going to take my word for it that last shot was in fact me, and I do believe it was. Like, I saw the reticle drifting right as the gun went bang. Resting your thumb, or at least for me, for this gun and the way that I do it, resting my thumb on the barrel like this basically makes no difference. For my practical purposes, the tiny amount of deviation that I might see, but I don't actually see personally, is worth it because of the ability to manage the recoil so much better. So, get off my knees for a second here. Okay, so my next test here is going to be, again, 3 rounds. We're going to clamp down with about a very firm handshake level of pressure. I'm going to clamp onto the front of the gun. I'm going to really grip onto it. And this time, let me know what you think, perhaps in the comments. But I expect to actually see more of a point of impact shift. It just it just feels wrong because it is. Here we go. See, I'm instinctively relaxing my hand, so I gotta focus on actually keeping pressure, which is hard to do while I'm focusing on all the other fundamentals. So bear with me. Okay, so not as crazy as I would have imagined. I would have thought it would be sending them maybe a fair bit low, because in theory, not like I have massive grips or anything, but in theory, I'm bending the barrel down against the forearm, you're bending it away from the point of aim. But as you can see down there, we got what we got. So interesting. All right, let's move on. Last 3 rounds. I had exactly enough ammo to do this test. Actually, I kind of tailored the test to the amount of ammo I had. So this is our, we're walking through the woods, we see an opportunity to take a shot, and we jump up and use a tree branch. But instead of placing our forearm on the branch like we're supposed to, we place the barrel accidentally. Let's see what happens there. Now I know this one's going to be a little bit more difficult to get stable, so I would expect my groups to open up a fair bit. But we'll see if there's any crazy shifts. And like I said, if I call bad shots, I'll let you know. So that one I would have called a little left. Felt like it broke right on the left edge of that lower right hand circle. That one, almost the exact same thing. Broke just outside the left edge of the bottom right hand circle. It tells me my natural point of aim is left. So adjust a little bit here if I can. It's hard because the barrel itself is sliding around left to right. That one felt like it broke very well centered. And you can see where those went. Very consistent with the prone test resting on the stick. We've got you know, 2.5 inches high, 3 inches high from our point of aim. So, you know, pretty interesting there. Let's run down there, take a close look at it, and chat about it a little bit. So here we are at the target. Let's go ahead and go over our results. So again, this is our prone baseline. We then have our resting barrel resting on the bag. We've got a 2.5, 3 inch point of impact shift from our baseline group upwards, right? Pretty interesting. So, and then we move on to this barrel resting on a stick group, and somehow we managed to print a tiny clover leaf, but point of impact shift was basically the same as barrel resting on a bag, which I suppose is logical. And I think that group is more or less just chance. Moving on to our kneeling positions. We've got our kneeling baseline. Again, this shot up here, most likely just me and, not being quite as stable. But the group is not really any different in size from our again, those are not part of it, from our baseline group up here, from our prone baseline. And it's far better centered around the target. And again, that's, I believe, because I am receiving the recoil from the rifle straight on into my body. The rifle is able to recoil straight back, and therefore muzzle rise is not happening as the rifle or as the bullet is exiting the muzzle. So what do we got with the thumb over? Now again, I called that shot to the right. As I'm attempting to minimize my wobble zone and I shift my attention to press, I saw the reticle start to drift to the right a little bit. So essentially, what I believe is that there is no point of impact shift with the thumb resting, again, just resting over the barrel. And to me, this makes sense because it's very light pressure and it's basically at the chamber. Like I'm at the thickest part of the barrel, very close to where the barrel enters the receiver. And I'm essentially already on top of a node, a steady spot in the barrel's harmonic movement. So it's not surprising to me that I did not see a perceptible point of impact shift. And that's been proven to me doing actual shooting at range using that method to mitigate recoil. I still hit stuff. So I keep doing it. And then I've got, so these are not part of it, but I've got the thumb clamping. So it was kind of difficult to remind myself to actually clamp, but I just had to keep reminding myself, actually clamp down. And I clamped down kind of as hard as I could without shaking. I kind of expected a little bit more shift. And I suppose it's not too surprising that I didn't see that because, like what I was just talking about, I'm right on top of what might be considered a node or anti-node, like a solid spot. You've got the action screw clamping down like just behind where my thumb is. You've got the action screw clamping the receiver, and you've got the barrel into the receiver right there. It's a very solid area of the rifle. There's not a lot of movement happening there to begin with. And so putting extra pressure there doesn't seem to make a whole lot of difference. I called all these shots as good as my wobble zone, right? I was keeping my wobble inside of this circle, and they all landed inside of that circle. Now, resting on the stick. Every one of those shots I called just a little, well, no, sorry, not every one. The last one I actually called good. I would have called it good, and it went up and to the right. These ones over here, I called left. I saw the reticle as the gun went boom, the reticle was over here, right? And you actually do see that. Like you see it. But you see that point of impact shift, the same one we saw up here, resting on the bag and resting on the stick, like essentially exactly the same. So, barrel resting on something, like with the weight of the gun, resting the barrel on something. With that rifle, with a lightweight hunting contour barrel, that's no good. Just don't do it, right? Thumb over the barrel, right in front of the scope, I see no problems, and I'm going to keep doing it. So, that's my test. Hope you enjoyed that. And that's all I got for you. Peace.